I'm going to talk about rather more abstract way of thinking on the individual, the personality, or the hero. I'm going to talk about great man theory. So, as it is common in philosophy, you either start with Plato or Aristotle. This time it's going to be Aristotle. So we have the notion of megalopsychia, which means a great soul. And Aristotle writes that the great soul, it is a soul that deserves a lot, but on the same time, it requires a lot. That soul works openly and is sincere, truthful. It does understand what love and hate is. Regardless, it is friendly with people, it helps others, and such a soul, it is a crown of all the virtues. Again, through philosophy, when talking about the great people, first to directly use in philosophy the term heroism is Giambattista Vico. He wrote about the formation of nations and previous eras of humanity, where, according to his writings, there were in the first era, the age of formation, there were giants that formed the families and were protecting them. And on the other hand, there were wanderers, so people wandering around that needed their protection as well. So the giants took them under their protection, which led to the age of heroes, when those giants gave out some of their rights to the wanderers, and thus the giants became the heroes, and the wanderers, being under their protection, became the commoners, the Gentile people. And the last age that Vico speaks about is the age of humanity, where those rights of the heroes, previously giants, are further away, being given to the Gentiles, which led to a fact and condition that people forgot about so-called poetic wisdom that was the trait of those giants that formed the laws at the beginning of humanity. Yet the most important, from the perspective of my presentation and the great man theory as a whole, is 19th century Scottish author Thomas Carlyle, who wrote a book, Hero in History. That's the beginning of direct involvement or interest in heroic people, great men, individuals, and geniuses, and so on. He describes 6 types of heroes. God, which in his writing he uses an example of Odin, the northern or Germanic god. Then we have the prophet, and Carlyle uses the example of Mahomet. Then we have the poet, and obviously, as a Scottish or Scottish English writer, he uses the example of Shakespeare. Then we have the priest, and he points out towards Martin Luther. Furthermore, we have the priest, the journalist and publicist, and he uses as an example, he uses the person of Robert Burns, the Scottish writer. And finally, we have the king, and those Carlyle writes about 2 examples of such a person, and it is Oliver Cromwell and Napoleon. Heroes generally, according to Carlyle, are sent by God's providence to guide and lead common people. Their goal is to fight in the right cause, no matter the circumstances. They are different from the others because they understand the deep tissue of reality, and thus can change and reshape the reality, and they have certain traits, as Carlyle writes. Prophet, he tells people what to do. Poet tells people what to love. Priest leads the nation, enlightening God's truth. Journalists give out their soul through their genius writing. And a king is the archetype of the hero, gathering all of the types and having all of the traits of such a hero. When I am thinking about the roots of such a person from such an abstract, speculative perspective, I believe that there are at least two ways of seeing how those people that are being given by the God's providence, according to Carlyle, are understanding their role. It is either through illumination, as in Saint Augustine's, in which God, by his grace, gives such a person, such a hero, understanding of things. And with the heroes, it is the understanding of either history or their special role in the history. Or the other thing that I'm pointing at is Henri Bergson's intuition, when he actually writes on the philosophers and philosophical intuition, yet we can extrapolate and put the intuition on the heroic side. So such a person would be born with a goal or a simple thing to say, and the intuition that that person have opens the path to fulfill such a goal. He's trying to make that simple thing or simple thought to be expressed. Such a hero works on it throughout his whole life. Yet it is never achieved, and it is always the way, not the outcome. And such a person understands his role and that simple thing and a goal through negation of certain ideas or circumstances or social circles. He understands that they are not working well, or that idea is just wrong. Then that person understands that it is his or her goal to reshape the reality. Few other authors were writing about individuals in history and in according to philosophical views. Well, obviously we'd go with Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche. He was actually a reader of Thomas Carlyle, yet he thought that his works and the way he understood the heroic was wrong. And with Nietzsche, we have person, the individual, that leads or tends to go towards becoming a overman, the Übermensch. He does it through gathering certain traits or becoming certain types of person, such as free spirit, the person that is not confined with morality, that it is the person that is creative, that tends to be rivalry with the others, and that such a person decides on good and bad on its own, regardless of common morality. Then we have the notion of genius, or that person becomes a genius. Such a person, according to Nietzsche, is a person that through years of suffering developed another sense, a special sense in some division of creation, and thus can push that part of human creation further. Then we have the creator, which is a gifted person that searches for the means of self-realization. It is a closest way to becoming the Übermensch. And creation of such a person serves all of humanity. And the Übermensch, it is like an ideal. it is a sum of all the above stances or ways of being a person. And the Übermensch have got two traits. He have giving virtue and minimizing virtue. The giving virtue is a virtue that allows that person to create everything that such a person creates. It serves society in the best way. And the minimizing virtue is the understanding of vanity of common morality, which stems from being a free spirit. So outside of such morality, and Nietzsche writes as well about amor fati, that is when a person is confined with their own fate, understands it and accepts it, and the will of power, which is the energy that drives such a person to their goals, no matter the outside circumstances. Next philosopher that was thinking or philosophizing over the individual is Ayn Rand. Her ideal individualist was John Galt from her books, The Hero of Individualism. And her individualists are people, she says that those people should be self-interested. It is rational to act according to individual self-interest, no matter what. It is a bit further from the other ways of seeing a hero. The other author that was more further from seeing a hero as a good person led by God is Stirner with his notion of the unique. And he writes that one should decide for themselves no matter what and fulfill their interests no matter what, not even according to their own self-interest, but to their will, whatever it would be. And next author, going back to God's providence and God's illumination and such notions, is Søren Kierkegaard with his notion of night of faith that serves in total subordination to God. But because of that, he goes against the society, he breaks norms, he is kind of quiet with his work, he realizes the risk, but believes in improbable through the strength of absurdity, even though he understands that his deeds and the fact that he is a knight of faith is improbable. Those deeds are improbable and society wouldn't recognize him. He still believes in it through the strength of absurdity. Then we have few authors that were philosophizing over the hero or thinking on the hero, yet through the perspective of determinism. And we'll start obviously with Hegel. Great man comes from the society, hence he is built by it and gets all of that he possesses from the society. Yet the rational spirit of history determines the action of such heroes, and even if they serve their own cause, Hegel gives out the example of Julius Caesar. They are just a tool in history hands. Hence, Caesar realizing his own private goals would be a tool in the hands of the rational spirit of history, and eventually not even realizing the fact of rational spirit of history being in action, he still plays a role in reforming the history according to that spirit. Still, those heroes, according to Hegel, they understand the deep tissue of reality, as Carlyle wrote, so they can draw from the underground the things that are not understood by the common people. And after Hegel, the same stance presents Kautsky, a Czech philosopher. And according to Kautsky, heroes are those who recognize the spirit of the history first and act accordingly to it. So they are first to be in the history and on the right path of history, and that makes them a heroes. To add to it, we have a notion of genius that was talked and analyzed by many philosophers. In Latin, it means the spirit, the guarding spirit of a person, the safeguarding spirit of a person. And first to write about the genius was David Hume, and he wrote that despite the abilities that such a person, the genius person, have, they are seen by the society as ignorant, distant, and different, and rather being thrown out and rejected, not understood. On the other hand, Immanuel Kant writes that genius is a person that have the ability to understand concepts without the outside help, that is original, and is talented to produce ideas that are not copying, they are original. So genius is someone that provides for the others, such as in Nietzsche and actually as in Carlyle works. Next to approach the notion of genius was Schopenhauer, and he says that such a person is a man whose intellect transcends the will. So he understands the roots of his will that drives him, and through his intellect he can do something with it. Then they can create works, art, and ideas being purely aesthetic and or contemplative, and that makes them distance from the world, because world doesn't work in such a way. And the last author that I'm going to mention in that part is Bertrand Russell, and he said that genius is a person with certain unique talents and abilities, yet such a person might be suppressed or not recognized by this person's surroundings, and the genius might not be realized. So it is on one hand that person have such special abilities and talents, yet it might not come to a positive ending. We have the change in history through the individual. As William James stated, the social changes in history are the outcome of deeds of great men, and it is not the environment that creates a great man. They rather are understood, and we as people from the outside, we see the great man only in their action of reshaping the reality. So if someone reshapes the reality, that actually makes him a great man. And the fact that they are able to do it is because they are born with certain traits. And James writes about genetical background of such people, believing that his or that such people deeds are done because of their different brains, and society might either adopt or reject such a man, even when they understand and they see that the change goes through those people. Then again, with the newer, more recent philosophers, we read that Kuhn and Wetherington, in their article from, as far as I remember, 80s, they read history. So we, not only they, we read history through the lens of individual stories. That's how we write history. Here today on the conference, we see a lot of individual stories that are a background of the history, or the way we can see the history through the lens of personal situations and biographies. Yet, through their point of view, it is dangerous to ascribe all to the individual, and they write that historians should track the outside circumstances as well to check if actually it was the individual with special traits that are responsible for those changes, or were there more important other factors outside, so the society, and thus such a person was just a part of the society and driven by them, not a genius, rather a tool. And Sidney Hook writes that the individual is someone that chooses the path of history. So in his point of view, it is the individual reshaping the history through their creativity, and he gives out a division to the eventful man. So we have a man that makes smaller outcome, and then he writes about the event making man, and that's a person that can reshape centuries, and such an example would be Napoleon. And I'm gonna go briefly through the critics of all the philosophers that I mentioned before. Herbert Spencer was a radical determinist, and in his critique of Carlyle, he stated that people are fully determined by the outside circumstances and the spirit of history, and they have no power to change anything. And thus, heroes are simply non-existence, and we can't ascribe anyone or such traits or call them heroes. Since they are just a tool of history, and eventually the history would go same paths, no matter the individual effort. He was the supporter of full determinism, and to put those philosophical stances to Ukrainian history and some important figures, I would give out my own division of some important Ukrainian figures according to Carlyle. So we have hero poets, and you can see here Taras Shevchenko and Ivan Franko, which actually gave out a lot of writings that formed and reshaped the Ukrainian nation, and all of we know that they are still being read today, and they still have influence through their poetry on Ukrainian nation. We have a hero priest. I used the example of Andriy Sheptytsky, and he actually led Ukrainian people through the dark times of Second World War, and I would say that even according to Carlyle, he would be a good example of such a person, since he even is considered to be canonized in the Catholic Church, so his good deeds are being quite widely recognized. Then we have the journalists, publicists. I put out two examples of Grigoris Kovrda and Mikhail Hrushevsky, that their writings, more philosophical or historical in case of Hrushevsky, they are still being read and are super important in Ukrainian nation. They gave out their souls and gave out their life, dedicated their writings for the people, and we can definitely say that it pays out today. And lastly, we have a few examples of king type of heroes, and those are the leaders that led Ukrainian nations in different tough times. So we have Ivan Mazepa, Bogdan Khmelnytsky, Pavlo Skoropadsky, and Semen Petliura. All of them, they are figures that are not super controversial. They actually directly led Ukrainian nation, and yet, according to Carlyle and few of the other authors, some of them wouldn't be able to be called a hero, since the history showed that their deeds weren't good. At least they would recognize it as such, because finally, the states that they were trying to establish or run, they all failed. Even with Petlura and Skoropadsky, still the Ukrainian state failed during their lifetime. And finally, that would be all. So, thank you.